According to a leaked document, there is an alleged Russian proposal to annex Belarus by 2030. The plan would consist of 3 stages, starting with emphasizing Belarusian identity while limiting Western influence. The second stage would involve implementing a shared currency and issuing Russian passports to Belarusian citizens. Finally, the goal will be to create a unified culture in which the Belarusian identity is assimilated into Russian identity through language, media, and education. Ultimately, this aim is to establish a union state by 2030 in which Russia would politically, militarily, and economically absorb Belarus. Lukashenko's reaction to this alleged annexation plan has been somewhat disorganized, with him either downplaying its significance or outright denying its existence. Rather than addressing the proposed annexation directly, Lukashenko has chosen to speak of the friendship, camaraderie, and brotherhood between Belarus and Russia. However, these sentiments can only be genuine when there is a sense of parity and balance between the two nations. In reality, Belarus and Russia are far from equals, as they may share a border and certain cultural similarities, but the relationship is that of an unequal partnership, akin to that of a cub and a lion. Why the annexation? Belarus, positioned in the heart of Europe, has often found itself at the intersection of historical events. Throughout its history, the Belarusian identity has developed in a fragmented manner due to its subordinate role to Russia's strategic interests. While the Belarusian Republic enjoyed nominal independence under the Soviet principle of self-determination, its status as a buffer state means that its freedom was temporary and susceptible to shifts in geopolitical priorities. Periods of relative freedom were often followed by oppressive measures aiming to assimilate the culture, and its borders were frequently adjusted to conform to realist considerations. Nevertheless, the Belarusian identity underwent significant Sovietization over the years, largely influenced by its crucial role in resisting the Nazi war machine. Extensive industrialization efforts after World War II resulted in Belarus having one of the highest proportions of industrial output to GDP among post-Soviet nations, accompanied by relatively higher per capita income. However, the strong Soviet influence and reliance on Russian energy sources resulted in a relatively subdued sense of Belarusian nationalism. With the expansion of NATO into Poland and the Baltic states, Belarus's buffer role has become even more pronounced, positioning it as a crucial state for Russian security, second only to Ukraine. As a result, multiple integration agreements since the 1990s have merged Belarus's military industry, intelligence, and energy policies with those of Russia. The incorporation of Belarus into Russia would bring significant advantages to Moscow, not only in terms of enhancing Russian prestige, but also in addressing Russia's demographic decline. With a population of 9 million, the addition of Belarusians would help offset the ongoing demographic challenges faced by Russia. The cultural and linguistic similarities between Belarus and Russia would further facilitate the integration process and discourage any potential separatist movements akin to the Chechen situation. Additionally, absorbing Belarus would grant Moscow greater freedom in military operations within the country, as the current limitations imposed by Belarusian politics and bureaucracy would be removed. By utilizing manpower, industrial capacity, and military potential, Russia could expand its influence over strategic choke points. This would involve partially surrounding Ukraine and positioning the Russian army within striking distance of the Suwalki Gap, a narrow strip of land near Kaliningrad that connects Poland and Lithuania. This absorption of Belarus and the integration of the Belarusian KGB with the Russian FSB would enhance Russia's intelligence capabilities and improve its ability to monitor the NATO border. Moreover, the integration of Belarus and Russia would promote greater self-sufficiency in the face of Western sanctions. Currently, Moscow provides substantial annual subsidies to Minsk, and Russia's abundant natural resources would complement Belarusian industry. Whose plan was it? While it may seem tempting to attribute Russia's expansionist aspirations in Belarus to imperial ambitions, it was, in fact, Lukashenko who initiated the process. After assuming power in Belarus in 1994, Lukashenko expressed support for Boris Yeltsin's vision of a Russo-Belarusian union. Yeltsin saw this project as a means to establish a framework for governing other post-Soviet states. However, Lukashenko had different ambitions in mind. He aimed to climb the political ladder in Russia and challenge Yeltsin for leadership within the Union state. The process of integration between Belarus and Russia gained momentum between 1996 and 1999, ultimately resulting in the signing of the Union State Treaty. However, the emergence of Vladimir Putin as Yeltsin's successor posed challenges to Lukashenko's ambitions. Although the treaty declared a commitment to equality between Russia and Belarus, Moscow's perspective differed from that of Lukashenko. Since then, integration has presented a dilemma for Lukashenko as he finds himself in a subordinate position, constantly striving to protect Belarus from Russia's efforts to absorb it. Consequently, the unequal power dynamic frequently results in Russia securing the majority of concessions, a matter of acknowledged tension even by Lukashenko himself in the past. Ironically, the West not only missed the opportunity to leverage the existing tensions between Minsk and Moscow, but also unintentionally pushed Belarus closer into Russia's fold. This was particularly evident through the imposition of sanctions on the Belarusian government, which left Lukashenko with limited alternatives. As the West cornered Minsk and hindered Belarus's economic diversification policies, it increasingly relied on Moscow for support. By 2018, Belarus found itself caught in a challenging situation, being squeezed from both sides. Putin reinvigorated his pursuit of the integration plan, and 2 years later, following an election widely viewed as fraudulent, Lukashenko remained in power, with Putin gaining the leverage he needed, aided by the FSB. As a result, nationwide protests in Belarus were forcefully suppressed. In 2021, Lukashenko signed agreements related to 28 integration projects, primarily focusing on economic, regulatory, and military aspects. It is within this context that a leaked document, reportedly outlining Moscow's plan for full annexation, surfaced in the press. The Annexation Plan. The leaked document, titled Strategic Goals of the Russian Federation and Belarus, spans 17 pages and primarily focuses on countering NATO's influence. It allegedly outlines Russia's short, medium, and long-term objectives. According to the document, Russia's goals for 2022 and beyond involve implementing reforms to the Belarusian constitution and curbing the influence of nationalist and pro-Western elements within Belarus. Up until now, these objectives have primarily been achieved through exerting pressure on Lukashenko. By 2025, Russia aimed to establish a sustainable level of influence in Belarusian politics, military affairs, and business sectors. The document also mentioned goals such as currency unification and simplifying the process for Belarusians to obtain Russian travel documents. This strategy of passportization has previously been utilized with separatist groups in Georgia and Ukraine. Furthermore, Moscow intends to leverage its economic power to advance its interests. Despite Lukashenko's efforts to diversify economic partnerships, the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, partially launched from Belarusian territory, closed off those opportunities. Subsequently, faced with extensive Western sanctions, Minsk had limited options but to further integrate with Russia. By 2030, Russia's objectives include gaining control over the information space, fostering a shared culture, and establishing a unified interpretation of history. The plan entails promoting assimilation into Russian culture through language promotion, consolidating media outlets, facilitating student exchanges, and providing funding to lobbying organizations with Russian affiliations. These measures aim to shape the cultural and informational landscape to align with Russia's interests. What happens if Belarus is annexed? By implementing such measures, Russia would be following a similar approach seen during the Soviet era, effectively consolidating Belarus as its subordinate neighboring state. However, it is important to recognize that geographic realities cannot be ignored. Despite the strategic complexities arising from the invasion of Ukraine, any efforts to implement the Belarusian plan would still have to grapple with the inherent challenges presented by geographical factors. To begin with, if Russia were to fully annex Belarus, it would extend its borders to reach Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia, effectively enlarging its NATO border by approximately 1,250 kilometers. This distance is comparable to the length of Russia's border with Finland. Consequently, security expenses would increase for both sides. However, a key distinction lies in the fact that while Washington would financially support Poland and Lithuania, Moscow would have to bear the financial burden alone. Hence, preserving Belarus as a buffer state could potentially be one of the rare points of consensus among Russia, Poland, and the Baltic states. Furthermore, if Belarus were to be annexed by Russia, it would result in an additional 1,100 kilometers of border between Russia and Ukraine. While this may provide Moscow with greater influence over Kiev, it would also require allocating resources to monitor the border, which could otherwise be utilized more effectively in the Ukrainian conflict. Additionally, the annexation of Belarus would necessitate considering the prevailing public sentiment within the country. In recent years, a subtle divide has surfaced, predominantly along demographic lines. Older generations have maintained a semblance of their Soviet identity, whereas younger Belarusians lean towards the West. Lastly, it is crucial to acknowledge the significant role of Lukashenko himself. Despite playing a subordinate role to Putin for an extended period, the bilateral relationship is founded on the principle of maintaining sovereign equality. Consequently, any blatant encroachment on Lukashenko's authority may entice him and his local allies to seek support from the West or align with Belarusian nationalists. Final remarks. The desire for power is ingrained in human nature. Everyone seeks to increase their influence while avoiding any reduction. Predicting the impact of relevance deprivation syndrome is challenging, and Lukashenko would likely seek to complicate Putin's endeavors to diminish his own authority. Currently, Belarus is in a delicate deadlock. Geographically, it has always been situated at a crucial junction, and now it also faces a critical moment in history. Despite its close cooperation with Moscow, the conflict in Ukraine has compelled Belarus to make an unequivocal choice. Whether Belarus has sided with the victorious party is yet to be determined. It is expected that the situation will deteriorate further before any signs of improvement emerge, as demonstrated by Russia's recent declaration of plans to deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. However, Lukashenko has shown himself to be a shrewd and skilled negotiator in his political dealings with Putin. He is not one to passively accept his diminishing position of influence. Perhaps Lukashenko's resourcefulness alone could prove to be significant, as even a strategically positioned pawn can wield more power than a king in certain circumstances. But what do you think? Will Russia officially annex Belarus? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with our latest uploads.